Ahoy, and welcome. This is Admiral.
Wololo.
Forgotten Empires really likes giving civilizations some form of healing ability. Well, the Vikings were the original anti-aging pioneers and sole masters of the secret of innate regeneration in the original Age of Kings and throughout the Conqueror's expansion. The list of civilizations with either a regeneration attribute or aura healing effect has now grown to 13. Today we're going to look at what I think is the most unique implementation of regeneration in a long time, the Jurchen Castle Age unique technology Fortified Bastions. The tech costs 350 food and 250 wood and allows defensive buildings, namely walls, gates, towers, castles, and town centers, to repair themselves by 500 hit points per minute. As a footnote of community history, I've seen this idea thrown around several times in civilization builds, although always with far more conservative numbers, either with reference to repair crews or the so-called self-repairing Roman concrete. And in Space AoE2, or Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds, I believe the Gungans had a bonus for regenerating buildings. Now let's check out this technology and see how good it is within the context of the Jurchen civilization, as well as with some comparisons to notable defensive bonuses or technologies of other civilizations. We'll start off by noting how the technology compares to standard repairs. The first repairman on a building repairs 750 hit points per minute, and any additional repairers work at half that rate, or 375 hit points per minute. So the technology is like having an invisible repairman that works 2/3 as quickly as a lone repairman, or 1/3 as quickly as a team of 3 villagers repairing together, while also being free. So you can think of the Jurchens as the first civilization to have unpaid or volunteer firefighters. Now let's look at castles and their nemeses, and see how this technology holds up at helping Jurchen castles hold up against some common besiegers, starting with rams. A generic castle with no upgrades can take 34 hits from a battering ram before crumbling to dust. If we research masonry, that rises to 38 hits. If instead of masonry we get fortified bastions, the castle can now take an impressive 48 punches from a single battering ram, which is even better than a Byzantine castle at 44 hits, although of course you do have to pay for the technology. So does this make fortified bastion castles the strongest yet?
You are strong. Very strong. Strongest so far.
Perhaps, but let's see how they fare in the still hypothetical situation of uncontested ram attacks, but now with more rams. A pair of rams will beat an unupgraded castle down in 17 hits each, whereas a masonry castle takes 19, and a fortified bastions castle is only slightly better at 20 hits, with Byzantine castles now taking the lead at 22 pairs of hits. If we throw in a third ram, an unupgraded castle goes down in 12 trios of hits, and both a bastions and a masonry castle will go down in 13, with 15 hits for the Byzantine castle. The clear conclusion so far is that while Fortified Bastions looks fantastic under sustained attacks dealing relatively low damage, or a series of intermittent attacks, it's looking very comparable to Masonry when it comes to the type of concentrated assault that one might expect to face from a prepared opponent. As such, Masonry should almost always provide better bang for your buck, given that it's more than 400 cheaper than Fortified Bastions after the Jurchen's discount, while also affecting your other building types. The armor provided by Masonry will also be slightly more useful against a large assault from infantry or other melee units, as 20 fully upgraded Castle Age longswordsmen will take down a Bastion's castle in 70 seconds, whereas a Masonry castle will take 78. But let's look into a few other cases before making the final verdict. In Imperial Age, a single trebuchet can take down an unupgraded castle in 12 shots, which takes 2 minutes. As an interesting reference point, that's enough time to recover about 1,000 hit points if we had the Fortified Bastions technology. So we'd expect this to confer a similar survivability improvement to a castle that only had the Hoardings technology, which adds 1,000 hit points. And testing confirms that both a Hoardings castle and a Fortified Bastions castle can take 14 hits from a single trebuchet, whereas a castle with only masonry takes 13 hits. And if we double up on trebuchets, a castle with only masonry, or with only fortified bastions, will both take 13 hits, or 7 pairs of volleys from the 2 trebuchets. Adding masonry back in with fortified bastions lets us survive 1 more trebuchet shot, or 14 if the 2 trebs are attacking. Adding architecture brings that up to 16 shots, and adding hoardings raises that to 19 shots, both of which are the same for Imperial Byzantine castles without and with hoardings respectively. So if you can sustain an attack with 2 trebuchets, or other units that deal comparable damage per minute, a fully upgraded Jurchen Castle with masonry, architecture, hoardings, and fortified bastions will perform very similarly to a fully upgraded Byzantine castle with hoardings. Another way to think about this is that you have around 2 minutes of sustained attack before a fully upgraded Jurchen Castle starts to become more difficult to take down than a Byzantine castle. Fully upgraded Jurchen Castles will perform better against small to medium-sized groups of melee units than Byzantine castles due to their higher armor, but even this difference is negligible if the attacking force is large enough. And 40 generic champions charging will take almost exactly as long to take down a Byzantine castle as a Jurchen Castle. Of course, real games will always be more chaotic than any of these tests, and therein lies potential advantage for the Jurchens for every moment they can delay the destruction of their castles. I'm sure you get the idea, so I don't think we need to go into every possible combination of castle technologies and every matchup of type and number of enemy units. The takeaway is that the technology is only as strong as the time it has to work with, which can indeed be extremely strong in slow, grindy battles or intermittent attacks, but far more mild if the opponent brings enough firepower to make a relatively quick and decisive siege. The conventional wisdom of avoiding trickle-trebbing, or trickle-ramming, is more important than ever when facing up against Jurchen castles with fortified bastions. Before we wrap up, let's take a quick look at town centers and towers. The Jurchen Fire Department is quite competent when it comes to handling town center arsonists, not only because the 500 hit points a minute represents a larger portion of their total hit points, but also because repairing a town center normally costs twice as much wood as other buildings, and the free self-repair can save a lot of wood. In the case of consistent attack from a single mangonel, after taking the regeneration into account, the town center's self-repair effectively negates about 2/3 of the mangonel's damage, meaning it would take a mangonel 10 minutes to destroy a town center. Of course, nobody is actually going to bother with that, and the technology comes too late to be of use in an early Castle Age siege push, but it really highlights the importance of waiting until you're ready to go in for the kill when you're trying to take down bastions, town centers, or castles, rather than trying to whittle them down with a constant assault with middling damage or sporadic attacks. The technology also applies to towers, and in theory provides fantastic value as it regenerates a larger proportion of their total hit points, for example by fully repairing a watchtower in just over 2 minutes, or a guard tower without masonry in 3 minutes. I don't think this makes it good enough to go out of your way to make defensive towers, but there is potential for synergy with a tower rush and castle drop, as prolonging the nuisance of any surviving forward towers and getting up to a free tower's worth of repairs every 4 to 6 minutes for every damaged tower sounds pretty good. And this pairs well with the Jurchen's cheaper tower and defensive upgrades. Even watchtowers are surprisingly mangonel resistant after this technology, taking 3.5 minutes or 35 shots for a single mangonel to bring down versus about a minute and 17 seconds, or 13 mangonel shots for a normal watchtower. The technology also applies to walls and gates, probably its least important application, but good enough to notice in those few cases where it is relevant. Overall, I don't think that getting this tech will usually rise to the level of meta in Castle Age given the cost of getting a castle up, researching the unique tech, and either focusing on military production or booming on multiple town centers with a lackluster economy, but it could make sense if you have a forward castle and are anticipating a treb war as you age up, especially if you already have masonry. Of course, there's always an opportunity cost, and depending on your situation, you might get more value out of using those 600 resources for iron pagodas or other units to snipe enemy trebuchets. I haven't gone into detail about the possible stone savings, especially since repair cost is half of the original price anyway, so healing a castle from 1 hit point to full health has a stone value of 325, not 650. And in this discussion I've been considering hit points as a more important proxy. But of course the value of stone and wood saved by the free repairs of this technology can be considerable in a long and grindy game. I also haven't talked about adding standard repairs on top of this technology, but of course I would recommend that if your buildings are in serious jeopardy. In terms of prioritization of your defensive technologies, I would certainly get masonry first, and possibly even architecture and hoardings given their discount, unless you had castles, towers, or town centers that were already heavily damaged and wanted to cash in on your free repairs. But I think it's definitely worth getting in late game as soon as you're floating resources for it. Overall, I think this is a cool technology. Fun, flavorful, potentially powerful, and unique. While I could see it being tweaked a little down the road, it's definitely not pay to win given the latest win rate stats, but that likely has more to do with Jurchen's lack of a mid-game economic bonus and Nightline. So those are my thoughts on Fortified Bastions, but what do you think? Have you been able to use this technology to notable advantage with the Jurchens? Or as an opponent of the Jurchens, have you found it annoyingly difficult to deal with? Or somewhere in between? Let me know in the comments. That's all for today, and thanks for watching. This has been me blathering on about the bountiful benefits of barrage, blast, and bombardment-resistant bastioned buildings. Till next time.